Chance I might need to dip out, but I don't know yet.
I mean, oh boy. And we are back once again. It is the original, the OG show, the Climbing the Pocket podcast. I am your host, Jayson Brown. You can find me on Twitter at BrownJayson. And I am here. I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the sexy prince, Yinka, my man. Twist looking right, face looking smooth. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How you doing, Jayson?
Doing all right, man. You know, like Myles hopped in with me yesterday. He was here with Flip. So, got to get you in. JR and Myles, they got some stuff to do this evening, but it would not be right for a full week to go by without getting some thoughts from you on our Minnesota Vikings. They've dipped back under 500. We did not play the game we felt they should have played, but we played the game many predicted they were going to play against the Bucks. Obviously, there were some things that happened in that game that really swung it against the Vikings. How are you feeling coming out of the game? Because many of the things that were written immediately following really have focused on some of the bad breaks the Vikings caught. Obviously, Dan Bailey forgot how to do his job in the game and single-handedly cost them double-digit points. And the referees, with a couple of blown calls, really swung things in the favor of the Buccaneers, basically walking them into the end zone, taking away an interception, and giving the Buccaneers another crack at it, which they punched in and turned into points. And the game was pretty much a different game at that point. So coming out of this game, what are your thoughts on the Vikings? And let's just start there. What are your thoughts on the Vikings? What are your thoughts on the game? And how did you feel about the bad breaks the Vikings caught in the game against Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I'll start there, Jayson. I think a couple of things as far as like the bad breaks. I know we had talked offline, and I didn't necessarily feel that those bad breaks were like, it didn't anger me. I can understand why it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. So it's like, hey, that was probably about a 13-point swing towards the Bucks that really put the game away. But for me, I didn't really feel as if.
I mean, they called a pass interference for the first time on a Hail Mary since
exactly.
2009.
Like that
Jeff Gladdy's interception. I mean, those are.
I was kind of like, Yeah, I was kind of like, wow, like I didn't expect that pass interference call on the Hail Mary because again, I had never seen that in my time. I've only ever learned that basically anything goes on a Hail Mary. I can understand with that call, but I think you had said it the best is honestly that's going to happen in games, right? Um, Crap just this comes out of the way. The refs, they might see a certain thing, they might call things wrong. Like refs get things wrong; they're human too. Yes, we expect them to play at a or not, to call the game at an elite level at constantly, but they make mistakes too. And the biggest issue comes that the Vikings just aren't good enough to uh, overcome those kind of hurdles when they present themselves. And it's really hard for me to just put it on the Zebras because at the end of the day, if we were up by 21, yeah, that would have sucked because it would have brought the Bucks within tying or winning range. But to me, I never felt like we were ever truly in that game. So that's why I didn't really feel any kind
Oh,
of way about seeing something like that.
so I guess
Um,
yeah. Help me understand that then, because to feel like we weren't really in the game in the first half, the Vikings. I mean, if you look at it, the Vikings. It seemed as though the Vikings were dominating many aspects of that game. They were
they
dominating
dominate.
possession. They were moving the ball up and down the field. Yes, they weren't punching things in for touchdowns, so like that is a valid critique. But in every other aspect, I mean, they were doing what you would hope. Tom Brady had not yet really gone off in the game. We kept their weapons largely under control. Help me understand why you didn't really feel like the Vikings were in this game. That I mean, they really should have been leading by a lot more, say at halftime.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of the second thing you had mentioned as far as Dan Billing forgetting to do his job. But even with the fact that, yeah, I looked at the game and like, yeah, man, the Vikings are presenting the ball for a good majority of the game. I just never got the sense that they truly controlled it, right? Because they got into the red zone enough times where it's just like, man, you really could be dominating the Bucks right now, and you're not. Because honestly, Tom Brady did not play a good first half. But then again, you start letting a little bit of that daylight in, and that's what made me feel like okay. The beginning of the game, I felt like the Vikings are doing a good job, just barely staying above water, and then you really start to see them drown towards the end of that game. Um, it is hard, but I think pivoting back towards Dan Bailey, it kind of encapsulates the one of the issues that kind of stems back from a few years ago. Um, Mike Zimmer had a really bad taste in his mouth after the 2016 playoff loss, right? And they made the decision to go out and draft Dan Carlson, um, and they cut him shortly after him struggling. And the reality of it is he's performing really, really well right now. And now we have Dan Bailey, who is a little bit older. He's for most of his career he's been an outstanding kicker, but it definitely feels like because of that, because of this thing of Blair Walsh, Mike Zimmer is really, really quick to kind of forget either a new guy who again needs to go through growing pains, or a guy who has mostly been a really reliable kicker for his entire career and now he's just like, well, it's not time for feelings and stuff. And I'm just like, I get that, but yeah, Dan Bailey didn't perform well. He hasn't been. I would say this year he hasn't really been performing that well. He missed a few extra kicks. He's missed a few field goals. The only thing is like on the Bucks game, like all that went into overdrive. So I would say the reality of this is that Vikings are a below average team, and they continue to perform that way, even though they do have some really bright spots on, I would say both sides of the ball.
Before I respond to what you're saying, shout out to the man Arthur with the great eyes, spotting the autograph McDaniel in the back. That is correct. That is what it is. Shout out to David, who's in the truck right now producing the show. He put me on to a Good Morning Gallahorn. I think it was a Good Morning Gallahorn. Maybe it was just a Gallahorn Facebook group. And I won this in the draft, predicting that the Vikings were going to select Mike Hughes. So, Myles, thank you for giving me that inside information on how he felt this thing was going to go. Made the pick, got the jersey. Shout out to Drew, David, and our man Arthur for pulling that out and noticing the jersey in the back. Um, what I'm hearing from you is that you feel like maybe, well, two things: that Zimmer hates kickers, and I mean, I can understand that based on the experiences we've had with kickers since Zimmer's been around. So I'm not gonna hate on him for that. Um, but do you think our style of play maybe makes us over reliant on kickers? And it's tough for me to even say that because the Vikings were 4 or 5 on fourth down attempts in this last game. So I mean, they were aggressive, and they've been fairly aggressive throughout the year, and they've also been fairly successful on fourth downs throughout this year. So yeah, I guess do you feel like they need to even take that to another level, be more intent, have more intensity with going for it on fourth down? Like, what is the solution that you see? Do you think that they need to air it out more often? Like, what are you seeing as the solution for this Vikings team? Because again, up until towards the end of that second quarter, one could have made the argument that the Vikings were dominating that game. And then, things happen. Bucks put up a bunch of points, and then the Bucks basically ran out the rest of the game, and things never felt like the Vikings were really, really going to come back. Based on how that game started and how well it looked like the Vikings were doing early, like, what was it that you wanted to see them do differently tactically? Like, yes, score touchdown, sure, but like, what tactics would you have liked to see them employ that were different than what you were seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jayson. The Vikings have like the number one offense as it relates to in the red zone. Once they get inside the
Correct.
20, what's it?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and with that being said, it's like surprisingly enough, that's a team that I actually really trust. Is once they get inside the red zone, they're going to score a touchdown. Um, and I guess there was enough times where I think they got close or were in the red zone, and you could tell by the play call that they were just okay. We're already in the red zone. We're going to walk with points here, and then that didn't happen. And you mentioned a point that I'm forgetting, but it just it feels like this team we do have a team that would actually succeed more being a little bit more aggressive than we're being, and it just feels like we are really reliant on on our kicker. We are really relying, hey, if we can't get in the end zone, we do have a really reliable kicker. And I think with that style of play, what you see happening is like Dan Bailey deserves to have an imposing game in his career every blue moons, right? Um, and that happened to be on Sunday. But the problem is like the hope is that you have other areas that can overcome that, right? But with the way that the defense is playing, you can't rely on them as much as I would say that you have a pretty good offense or offensive players in place that can consistently yield you points rather than stopping opponents. So I guess to say like
Let
yeah,
me
you can make
unmute
the argument
myself
that
here.
you can make the argument that the Vikings were dominating. It just you can see how quickly that they can go from dominating to playing like pretty piss poor, and that variance right there is really scary to me. Rather than
I
just
think
like
that
oh they just
also I think that also speaks to why stats like time of possession are a silly proxy for quote unquote dominating a game because you don't get points for holding the ball. You get points for scoring touchdowns. Field goals are basically like it's almost a concession, but like the touchdowns are what matter. It doesn't matter how long you possess the ball. Um, I guess the question I had for you is: do you feel like maybe the Vikings play calling is getting stale? And Nick just posted in the comments about maybe we need to start mixing some things up, some motions, some jet sweeps, because it is funny when you're watching the game and you have the announcers on there and they're like, well, when the Vikings get to the red zone, it's Adam Thielen time, and they're gonna basically run a slant with Adam Thielen, and that's what the Vikings are gonna do, and that's what the Vikings typically have been doing, and it's been fairly successful throughout the season. Thielen has been, killing it in the red zone. If you have him in fantasy, he's been helping you out quite a bit. But do you feel like things maybe are getting a little stale? Like the Vikings need to mix it up, do a bit more to help Kirk, help the receivers, help us just score points, given that it seems as though everybody knows exactly what we want to do when we do get into scoring position.
Yeah, I'll say this, Jason. I don't know about you, but I didn't miss Kyle Rudolph at all in this game. And
I
I think
mean,
that speaks to I think that speaks to the point of, yeah, I think we have been very Adam Thielen reliant in the red zone. I think Justin Jefferson has done a good job coming into his own, but I don't think a lot of the points that we're getting from Justin Jefferson are in the red zone. A lot of them are getting on like these big explosive plays where he finds himself getting into the end zone. Um, and it's disappointing where the usage of it's a pass to Adam Thielen or it's a punch in with Dalvin Cook. And having Irv Smith Jr. there, um, hell, even Tyler Conklin, utilizing our tight ends a lot more so. It just feels as if, yes, the offense is stale because we are so reliant on Adam Thielen. That it's like if someone else scores, it seems like it's an issue, right? So I guess I would like to see more things where Adam Thielen, we know he's a threat, and using him more as a decoy to open things up for those other players. Because I mean, you could simple mesh routes. I think you should be able to get other players open, right? Um, but like it just it, it is stale right now, and I think it's been stale for a while. But you've found the bright spots because within that staleness, yeah, you'll get a flash of Justin Jefferson, but
and
outside of those,
Irv.
yeah, and Herb exactly. But outside of that, do you really get the feeling it's just like this offense is like everyone is just being used to their max potential, and I just don't feel that way.
All right. Well, let's spin this thing forward then. And the offense has another tough matchup as we look ahead now. The most of us penciled in the Bucks game as a loss. I will say, I think even the most diehard fans, even the most optimistic, penciled in that game as a loss. The way it went, I think, made the loss a bit more heartbreaking in the fact that it felt as though the Vikings should have won that game, or at least made it more competitive. Um, but alas, here we are. The Vikings did in fact lose the game, and they lost it by multiple scores, as I believe you and Myles both predicted last week. We spin forward to a game that, a couple weeks ago, I think most of us would have, chalked up as a win. You got the Bears at home. Wasn't sure who we thought would be playing quarterback, but now we have Mitchell Trubisky. He's back. He's playing what seems to be a bit better. One thing that you have to look out for when Trubisky is under center is that he is going to feed Allen Robinson the ball, regardless of what else is going on. Allen Robinson is going to be involved if Mitchell Trubisky is playing quarterback. And the Bears got a defense, even though they got some injuries. Secondary might be a little weaker than we're used to seeing with them. What are your thoughts? How are you expecting this thing to go as the Vikings play the Bears in a divisional matchup? So those are always, you can always kind of make those a toss-up.
Honestly, it's like you said. I think we would have chalked this up as a win a couple weeks ago. I'm still going to lean towards a win, but I think it's going to be another nail biter. I think the Vikings are going to keep it close, more from their mistakes than from the Bears just playing really, really well. I think they'll get their own on a couple times on the defense. Like you said, that the Bears defense is stacked. But I think that the Vikings are starting to get into I think the defense is starting to somewhat click on certain aspects of it. I think the corners are still super, super young. And Harris hasn't been really having a great season. Um, and really, I mean, you haven't really heard from that secondary much. I mean, Harry's playing okay, but um, it just feels like we're missing too many pieces up front for them to truly matter. Um, so I would say that I think the Vikings are going to be able to win this. If they do, it is going to be a very, very close game.
Look at you. You should work for PFF because their betting lines, their green line that you have to pay for on PFF Elite says the same thing. They think the Vikings are supposed to win, but it's a close game. They're calling it like a field goal, a little less than a field goal in terms of what they're expecting to go down. So I guess I'll ask you, based on what you've seen of late, for the Vikings to win this game and win it convincingly, the answer can't be Kirk Cousins because that is the most obvious answer. But who other than Kirk Cousins do you need to see on offense step up in a big way for the Vikings to have a chance to beat a Bears team that it feels like we should be a lot better than, but when you go and look at advanced stats, it says that we're pretty much the same damn team, which is in and of itself very, 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 very disappointing. But most of us feel like we should win. So if we're gonna win, who's gonna be the player not named Kirk Cousins that's gonna step up on offense to lead us to this victory?
I think surprisingly enough, it's going to be an Irv Smith Jr. type game. Um, I would love
That's
to
more
see
than
him.
one player, David. The offensive line is 5 players, so just one player, just one player. Maybe Dakota Dozier can be your answer, David, but like the offensive line, that's 5 players.
I think it's going to be an Irv Smith Jr. Kind of game. I feel like there's a lot of talent there that is still just so untapped. And I'm not saying he's going to be our Gronk. I'm not saying he's going to be a Travis Kelce type player. But I do think that he can be a guy that can help stretch the field a little bit more and take that pressure away from Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Um, and and truthfully, I'm just looking. We've been looking for that third weapon, and I think he's on the roster. He might not be a third wide receiver, but a third weapon for Kirk to pass to more. Irv should be there. There should be more things that should be able to be dialed up. But for whatever reason, when we have two tight ends on the field, we seem to not like to use them in passing situations. It's like
I mean,
if two
we
tight ends
we
on
do
the field,
we just like to throw it to Rudolph for some reason, which I mean I can't understand it, especially
well,
if we're
yeah,
not in the red zone. But like I can't understand it. Spin it forward for me, Yinka. Talk to me about the defense because I mean they don't look as awful as they did early in the season, but
right.
the defense is still missing a ton of pieces. Eric Kendricks, the best player on the defense this year, he's out, likely out. Um, so who are you looking at on that side of the ball to really step up and be the player that we're going to be looking at who really holds things together and maybe has the defense lead us to that even sounds weird to say, weird to have coming out of my mouth. This defense lead us to victory, but surprise player on the defense who's going to step up this week and we're going to be talking about next week.
I think Cam Dancer is another guy who I've been, I think he's still struggling. So I think with interceptions and stuff, people get really, really excited about him. I still want them to kind of pump the brakes as far as Cam. What I wanted to say earlier, actually, and I just remembered it, is I definitely feel with this team on both sides of the ball, we're really, really missing a leader. Whether that just be a vocal leader or whether that just be a person who can just rally this team when they are, are they either behind or they need to kind of fire up the team. We're missing a leader, and ideally, on the defensive side of the ball, Eric Hendricks I think has been that guy. But I mean, with him out, Harrison Smith, he's the quiet leader thing is like it's great in theory, but like I feel like Harrison Smith is the kind of leader who you watch him do the things he does, but he's not going to sit down and have these long-winded conversations about this is what your alignment is supposed to be, this is where you're supposed to be at. He's not. I don't feel like he's that kind of guy. So as far as on the defensive side of the ball, I may be looking for some young guys to start to step up. And you talked about Allen Robinson. I would love to see Cam Dancer, continue to improve the way that I think he's improving, even if he's still has a ways to go.
And speak on it then. You calling on Cam Dancer to put the clamps on Allen Robinson? Like, is that what you're saying? Is that what you're calling for? You saying is your
Yeah,
bold
yeah,
prediction is
yeah.
Cam Dancer is going to
My
lock
bold.
him down, erase him from this game?
Oh yeah, I want Cam to put the clamps on him. I mean, he's not an Xavier Rhodes type guy, but I think if we are going to look to a guy to shut Allen Robinson down, I think it's Dancer.
Okay, I mean he could be a Xavier Rose type guy. We give him some sandwiches, some steaks, some protein shakes this off season. Who knows? A full year in an NFL program, pump up them calories, get him in the weight room, and Lord only knows what's possible. Last thing here, you know what time it is. I need your bold prediction. I need your score prediction. Tell me how this thing is gonna go.
It is going to be 28-27 Vikings.
Ooh.
And they in the last 45 seconds drive down the field and score the game-winning touchdown.
Oh God. So, well, hold on, stop the presses, Dave. If you need a moment to capture for this episode, I think we just got it. We have the Saxy Prince predicting Kirk Cousins
Oh, I
coming
didn't say
in
that.
clutch
I didn't say that. I
in
didn't
the
say
fourth
that. I said,
quarter and leading the
yep.
team to yet another come from behind victory. I mean,
So
lock
I
that
didn't
up.
say that.
That's the promo for this episode, David.
Remember in 2015 when we faced Oakland and Adrian Peterson had that like huge run or whatever that he scored or whatever. That's what I see happening.
I mean, that
Is
still
it going
gets
to
chalked up as a game-winning drive in the stats. Like 3 years from now, 3 years from now, that's a game-winning drive for Kirk Cousins. So, David, book it.
Is that how that
Saxy
works?
Prince calling for a game-winning drive from Kirk Cousins. Vikings win in a nail-biter. That is it. That is all. That's the show. Viewers, thanks for watching. Listeners, thanks for riding with us. Prince, thanks for coming in. And David, let the people see you.
Hey, I'm
Tell
here
us what's
tonight.
coming up next.
Well, coming up tomorrow is two old bloggers with me and Darren Campbell of Grant's Tomb and Kick-Ass Blog as we continue this discussion of our team we love. And should be interesting.
I love it.
Vlogmas, today's Vlogmas Day 16, tomorrow's Vlogmas Day 17, and we are kicking. We've had a live show every day of the month, and we will continue through the end of December.
There we go. Love it. Well, that's it. That's all. David, play the music. Skol.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.